From my understanding at this point, the one thing that these vaccines, the genetic vaccines, actually do effectively is reduce hospitalization and death, but not, of course, disease infection and transmission.
That's a false claim, and this may be a shock to the audience. I'm a cardiologist. I can tell you, when we have a new product in my field, let's say a product for heart failure, for a company to make the claim that a heart failure drug reduces hospitalization and death, which are the two outcomes in heart failure, no different than the two outcomes of interest in COVID-19, the clinical trial must have a primary endpoint that is the composite of hospitalization and death. Patients must be randomized to active drug or product or placebo, and it must show a reduction in hospitalization and death. None of the vaccines have had clinical trials done versus placebo with that composite endpoint. None of them. And even in the observed data in clinical trials, there hasn't been any trend towards reducing hospitalization and death. The FDA, therefore, has never granted a claim. Believe me, if the vaccine manufacturers showed reduction in hospitalization and death in randomized data versus placebo, they would have granted that claim. That would have been the most powerful thing, but they never had it. What's happened over time is a false narrative that's developed from observational data. And what we've seen is the following. In observational data, there has been a multitude of biased analyses by investigators and doctors and those in the biopharmaceutical complex who are invested in trying to promote the vaccines, claiming that the vaccines reduce the severity of illness and reduce hospitalization and death. And how are they putting these biased analyses forward? Number one, the electronic medical records for almost all these systems have a default of unvaccinated. So when someone comes in the hospital, if no one really tries to ask the patient with their vaccine card and validate things, they remain, even if they're vaccinated, they remain counted as an unvaccinated. Number two, differential testing. Our CDC has said for the longest time, if one is unvaccinated, get a COVID test. But if you're vaccinated, no, don't get a COVID test if you come to the hospital for a variety of reasons. Number three, no adjudication of why they're in the hospital. So now we have people coming in with ankle sprains and all different types of things, people unvaccinated getting COVID testing, giving an opportunity to, in a sense, create a COVID case in the hospital. Number four, we have a situation where there is a difference in who takes a vaccine versus not. Those who take the vaccine are more worried. So someone who takes a vaccine, they're far more likely to get early treatment. And early treatment is what reduces hospitalization and death. Not vaccines, it's early treatment. But if the biased studies have no accounting of early treatment, which they never do, those who've gotten a vaccine but they get early treatment, i.e., if you noticed recently, Anderson Cooper and Bill Gates get COVID-19 together. Anderson takes 3 shots, Bill Gates takes 4 shots. They're talking. They've both taken Paxlovid. Kamala Harris gets COVID-19. She took Paxlovid. So I can tell you, those who've taken the vaccine are much more likely to have gotten early treatment, which really is the driver for reducing hospitalization and death. And then lastly, the groups aren't randomized. So there is a bevy of biased studies creating a false illusion that the vaccines reduce hospitalization and death. And you know it's false for the following reason. Most of these studies don't have any time delineation. That vaccine they could have had a vaccine 1.5 years ago. Well, wait a minute, everyone agrees the vaccines run out of any protection after 6 months. So that's a fatal flaw. Another fatal flaw is that there's disagreement among countries. So in the United States, while there was a false narrative saying that this is a crisis of the unvaccinated in the summer of 2021, Israel was publishing, the Israeli health agencies were publishing the vast majority of Israelis in the hospital and dying were fully vaccinated. And then the Europeans reported that. And then the UK, Scottish and the UK health security agencies dutifully reported that indeed the vast majority of people in the hospital were fully vaccinated. And they actually did keep track of who was fully vaccinated by the definitions. And now the province of Ontario pouring in data, those in the hospital are far more likely, to the tune of 70, 80, 90% are fully vaccinated. So it's been a complete false narrative that the vaccines prevent severe disease. And that is a complete analysis, and I'll stand behind it.
We live in an era of censorship and disinformation, and it can be really hard to know what's true and what's false in this information climate. To get honest information and insights you can trust, join us on Epoch TV. You can sign up for your 14-day free trial at ept.ms/free trial Jan. That's ept.ms/free trial JAN.
One of the things that we examine in our book is this glaring contradiction, and I spent a whole day interviewing the Yale professor Harvey Risch, who's been one of Dr. McCullough's most trusted and talented colleagues in all of this. And one of the things that I talked about with Harvey Risch was this unending, relentlessly rigorous standard that was applied to any repurposed drugs or supplements for treating the illness. And it was this, in order to make any claims about the efficacy of these repurposed drugs, it has to be a huge, randomized, double placebo-controlled trial. And if you don't actually meet that standard, then you can't make any claims about efficacy. But then when we come to the vaccines, which are brand new, we don't have experience of using these on a large human population, unlike, for example, hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, which have been around for decades. They have very well-known safety profiles. Now we jump to the vaccines, in which the standards that were being applied or that were being proclaimed must be applied against early treatment, they're just thrown out the window. So suddenly the methodology and the rigor of ascertaining safety and efficacy is just thrown out the window with the vaccines. There's so many biases in this. There's also outright academic fraud, which was admitted. I mean, papers submitted to prestigious medical journals subsequently retracted. I mean, we suddenly see that public medical policy becomes this massive propaganda endeavor. I mean, I know from my conversations with Dr. McCullough, he's just been stunned by what has happened to the world of academic publishing. So we document all of this, and you see this unfolding in real time, and the only logical conclusion that one can draw is that the way this pandemic has been presented to the public has been a presentation that comes out of propaganda offices and organs and not from unbiased scientific inquiry.